Dun, 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 boom, 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 boom. I obviously had to do that for copyright purposes. But anyway, hello. Welcome, listeners and X-Men fans alike. I'm Shalaan, and I'm here with my friend Jack and his boyfriend Devon. And this is our very first episode of Case of the X, where we deconstruct the X-Men films. The X-Men has played such a vital role in all of our lives growing up, and obviously to this day, to the point that clearly we're making an entire podcast about it. And though there has been much divide about whether or not these movies are good, whether or not they're great, or whether or not they're just flat out horrible, they still hold a pretty decent place in pop culture history, which is one of the reasons why we're going to sit down and talk about them for this series. So with that being said, welcome to Case of the X. And in case any of you were wondering, yes, that is a direct reference to the Maya song, Case of the X. So we're going to cross our fingers and hope that Maya is not a huge X-Men fan and she stumbles across this podcast and decides to sue us. So, yeah. Obviously, since this is technically our first little episode, I guess what we're going to do is introduce ourselves. We're going to introduce ourselves, give our X-Men origins. Haha, another great one, right? We're gonna do our origins, and then our two favorite X-Men characters. So Jack, do you want to start? Jack and Devon. Devon, say hi.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up? What's up?
Well, let's see. My name is Jack, and my X-Men origin is basically ever since I was maybe, I want to say like 3 or 4, I started watching this cartoon way back in the day. That was just the X-Men animated series, and I was just so entranced by these characters. And I just kept up with them all throughout my life. I'm, vanilla and mainstream, so my two favorite are Wolverine and Rogue.
Okay, and Devon, what about you?
I started with the animated series, but I mainly got into it with the video games. X-Men Legends and the Ultimate Alliance back on like the Xbox days.
Who are your two favorites?
Alright, I like Emma Frost.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna say Jean Grey, but I'm more partial to Scarlet Witch.
Those are all valid
I'm
answers.
more of like a Brotherhood fan.
You're a okay, and there, and there's nothing wrong with that. That I should have specified that like it could have been like a hero or a villain, like just
especially after watching the first one, I was like, when you're young, of course you're gonna gravitate towards the heroes, but when you're watching it again, like Magneto definitely had like a solid plan.
Yeah, Magneto was. I mean, we're not gonna act like Magneto was right. Especially today, not even today, in all of the world's history, Magneto was right. That's definitely true. Well, hello everyone. I'm Shalaan. My X-Men origin story, much like Jack, I was introduced to this little cartoon series when I was a kid back in the 90s. The X-Men animated original, or the animated series, excuse me. And yeah, from then on, I just really got into who they were as characters. They were the first comic book characters I ever got into, the first team I ever like really appreciated. And being a young black gay man, the X-Men really represented everyone who had been the minorities pretty much. And I always really related to that. Even when I was growing up and probably didn't even realize I was leaning toward the peen, if you know what I'm saying. But
we know what you're saying.
My two favorite X-Men characters are gonna have to be Rogue and Mystique were my first two favorites that I ever got into. But Storm quickly became my second favorite. Because I don't think it ever really registered for me at the time how awesome it was just to see like one of the first major black superheroes like that. And Storm was just always amazing. She was always commanding power. And she was just this beautiful goddess woman who didn't take any shit. And I love that about her. So I'm cheating. My three favorites are Rogue, Mystique, and Storm. And obviously, if we're talking about the movies, I'm not about to have a great time. But so to segue into that, let's talk about the first X-Men movie, which was directed by the forever problematic Bryan Singer. Not going to go into detail about why the man is problematic. Look it up in case you're curious, but he very much so is. But back to the movie. So we open with young Magneto. With him in the concentration camp, and he's pulled away from his mom. So you know what's funny about me watching the scene over? I didn't realize entirely that was his dad. Did you pick up on that originally?
Yeah.
I never realized it was his dad pulling her away. I thought that was like another cop guy the entire time because my entire focus on the movie was on the mom and her screaming out for him.
Kudos to the actress. I don't know who she is or what else she's been in, but kudos to that actress because she killed that scene.
She really did.
Like rewatching it, that was like a legit guttural, my son's being separated from me, I'm about to die scream.
Yeah.
It just gets to your heart.
Yeah, it really does. That's what I wanted to point out about it too, how like, it's a really powerful scene, and also it shows how the X-Men have always been grounded in like real life. Like in that, Magneto's main thing is that he's a mutant, but he's also a Jewish man. So he's seen all this shit happen before when it comes to how mutants are treated. The X-Men know how to get at your heartstrings no matter what their story is. Somehow it always fits in.
Right. And I worked down in my notes that like the opening scene really sets the tone to tell the audience that this movie is far from what you would expect from like a traditional superhero movie, especially at that time.
And what's interesting about that is the fact that was one of the first like mainstream superhero movies. So it kind of set that tone also. Not to say there weren't other movies before it that came out that didn't set that tone, because that was around the time also Joel Schumacher's R.I.P. rest in peace, iconic Joel Schumacher. Around the time his iteration of Batman was out, with Batman Forever and then Batman and Robin, both having very campy and gothy aesthetics, and I mean, if we're being honest, plots as well. And definitely when you think about like Blade, which came out in like 98 and featured like a very prominent Black superhero from the Marvel Comics universe also, which had very dark elements, very, very dark elements involving vampires and, the supernatural underworld. But like X-Men, for that to have been one of the first like mainstream superhero movies that set that dark tone and is really important. And then we move on to Rogue's intro. I will say that this scene is probably the most comic accurate Rogue gotten. I literally wrote that in my notes. But yeah, her introduction scene, it does set her up for later on. Her amazing arc in all of these films.
Well, I wrote down in my notes that I thought Rogue's introduction, it was kind of perfect. She's kind of the perfect character to be a gateway to the general audience to this world because of her particular power. It's a mutant power that's not really like straightforward. It makes everything get set up in a mysterious way. Like, what did this girl just do? Is her boyfriend dead? You can't touch her. What is going on? And then you like understand why like a normal person would look at her from the other side and be like, oh my God, I'm scared of this.
Because she's one of those characters who looks so normal, but she's probably one of the lethalest mutants, if lethalist is a word, excuse me if it's not.
We'll use it.
One of the most powerful mutants in this movie, that they don't touch on that whatsoever. Like, it's there, but they don't talk about the fact how she could literally kill someone if she touches them too long and then almost become them, and in turn have their power, their memories, and just fuck her up for a while. They don't touch on that too well.
And she also develops strength-wise. And
she definitely does. And the thing is, though, well, in terms of Rogue in the comics, I mean, we know how she is. She's the feisty Southern belle. But I actually really liked how her opening in this. I liked the aspect of her being kind of the young, innocent Rogue, because the Rogue in the comics is a little skanky. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but she's a little skanky.
But I feel like she had to have like a coming of age to kind of.
Yeah, like there was a growth set up for her to become more of that by her being a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we move on there to when Jean is speaking to the she's speaking to senators, not the UN, right? Who is she talking to?
She's speaking to the senators of the United States.
Or senators of the United States. Okay. I thought it was funny, not funny, but like her entire speech, everything she says, and this kind of just goes back to how grounded the X-Men are. If you took out the word mutant, it still would apply to any minority group. I was thinking about that. I don't have the exact verbiage down, but she said something like how these people throughout the years, when they've come forward, that's what she said, when they come forward, they've been met with fear and resentment.
Even violence.
Even violence, yeah. Because the X-Men have always meant to represent the oppressed and the minority groups. And, you know, the mutant gene is an allegory for being different, for being outcasts and being singled out for race and for sexual orientation.
I also thought it was really funny during that scene. She's explaining all this and they have her wearing glasses. You know, to make her look more intelligent and stuff, so they put the hot chick in glasses.
Yeah.
And you never see her wearing glasses in the rest of the franchise.
Never again. Maybe, but you know, what if they were her reading glasses? Wasn't she reading from like papers or something? No?
True.
It could be.
But then again, I haven't seen her wear glasses since that scene.
She hasn't read since then. Jean doesn't need to read papers. She reads minds, Jack.
I don't know. She barely did that in this film.
True. She was really weak in this film.
How fucked up like Professor X was for like breaking her down to like that limited amount of ability.
Yeah.
At her age.
Yeah, she's like in her late 20s, early 30s in this. Like Xavier must have screwed her brain up when she was 10. Professor Xavier's a jerk.
Xavier's a jerk. Senator Kelly. When he says we must know who they are, must know what they can do, he sounds like a jealous straight white person who's like, he's either like, we gotta find out what the gays are doing, what can they do, what are they doing to mess up our homes, what are all the queer folk doing? And then he also sounds like the people who want to like just appropriate in any culture that they don't belong to. And the funny thing about that is that he turns into a mutant later on. So it's like he hates mutants, but he becomes something that he doesn't want to be. But then also he sounds like those people who are just like, no, we got to figure them out so we can be just like them or better, you know?
Yeah, like those closeted politicians that are anti-gay.
Yeah. Or if you just want to call it what it is, racism. Because Senator Kelly is definitely a racist. You know, the coded language of being afraid and figuring out what it is they can do so we can stop them. Very much true to form to obviously everything that's going on today and has been going on today in the world and this country. You know, you have these people in power who make all these decisions who are essentially afraid of people for living, for existing. And that's another thing too. The X-Men, they do a good job of having these very, again, using the word grounded villains who represent, you know, the everyday man who is just afraid of a person who doesn't have control of who they are. You know, they're your politicians, they're your law enforcers, you know, they're prominent figures who really have a say and really can do damage to someone for simply existing and not having the choice in who they are. And then we have Wolverine's entrance. When Rogue arrives to, was it Laughlin City? So which is Wolverine's entrance. So when I was a young budding gay, the comment that the announcer makes about like, don't hit him in the balls, it didn't connect in my brain at the time when I was young that he meant like, you know, don't hit him in the balls because he'll be pissed off and fight you. I thought that meant it was going to turn into a sexual thing. Like if y'all touched balls, it's on. And I'm just like, what did this movie get into? I was a kid watching this. I don't know why my brain was there, but I was just like, they're touching each other's balls? What?
Hugh Jackman was really sexy in this one.
Yeah.
He was. And honestly, knowing Bryan Singer's history as a person, we understand why he was sexy in this movie. Can you imagine if we got Danny DeVito and like we were supposed to, like originally we were going to get Danny DeVito?
I really don't think that would have worked.
At all. Theoretically, yes, it could have, because, you know, in the comics, Wolverine is very short and stout, and obviously up until recently, well, not even recently, the last few years, if not the last few decades, Wolverine has started to resemble, or does like actually resemble, Hugh Jackman, because, you know, he has become Wolverine, he's embodied Wolverine. So, you know, the comics, and of course, start to reflect live action. But I don't know, Danny DeVito would have been or served as a decent version or iteration of Wolverine.
I thought his introduction was great. He was really tiny though. I was like, wow, that's Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, no, it does. But also shout out to him for getting as huge as he did, because
Yeah, definitely.
um
But I thought his intro kept with the tone of keeping these characters mysterious and somewhat frightening at the same time.
I feel like Wolverine was kind of more of the psychological toll it takes to be like a mutant. Like his like dreaming, like the PTSD kind of aspect to it.
True, yeah, because he's lived for like hundreds of years. He's pretty old. So even like memories that he doesn't have, like that's still in his head. He's still fucked up over that, even if he doesn't remember it. Yeah, so I was saying it would have been cool if the scene actually played out where Rogue did steal the she did steal the change, and that's what actually set off the everything in the bar with the fight. Like as she's trying to get away with it, Wolverine steps in to help her, and then that's when like the whole showdown would have started. I just think that would have been cool because that would have given Rogue more to do. And she would have that would have shown more of her feisty side to what we know that Rogue has, the very aggressive Southern belle that she is. So I think it would have been cool if she actually stole that change and it turned into a whole thing.
Yeah, it's true. I could see that. I did want to point out though that like on the TV screen they pointed out the third act being introduced about the UN nation showing up. It was like a really nice way to do it organically in film. I did really love the fact that when Wolverine does put like his hands up against that guy's throat, that the bartender forces him to get out and telling him to get out and calling him a freak, even though he wasn't the one causing the harassment at all. It was the guy that was like just being a douchebag. But you know, since he found out he was a mutant, he kicked him out instead of the other guy.
Wolverine is clearly strong enough; he could have handled that without without whipping him out. But that's Logan for you. He's got that berserker rage that we all love.
Right. I did love that after that scene, he went to his truck and started holding his hands because the claws hurt when he brings them out. And I really wish that the film series would have showed that more often, or if at all after this movie, mainly because it made all your superheroes look more vulnerable and they weren't like invincible.
I like that there was that beat between him and Rogue where like he's saying, you know, she asks if they hurt and he says, yeah, like they don't come back to that at all. As much as they touch on his pain and his healing and stuff throughout the other movies, they never come back to the fact that
which is a shame because that's a really, really nice way to build a character up. Or to show like a character like that's as invulnerable as Wolverine, that he is vulnerable every time he uses his powers.
I feel like this movie does a really good job, the first one anyway, it does a really good job of setting everything up. It does a really good world building. You can see where, obviously, if this movie were to come out today, it'd be significantly different. But you can see like the groundwork of them trying to build the world of these other characters. I don't know what happened to that. So then we have like what goes into that Wolverine and Rogue's first talk. Again, how did you feel about that? How did you feel about them building up their characters? That the one like good talk where characters like connect in these movies, because that doesn't happen often in these X-Men movies. There are a lot of relationships that are there, but they don't expand on. But this is one that does pay attention.
I love Wolverine and Rogue's relationship and their dynamic in the film series more so than I like his comic relations with Jubilee or Shadowcat. I think Wolverine and Rogue's dynamic is so great. It's such a great original idea that could have been expanded on a lot better in the films. But throughout this one particular film, it's literally the highlight of the film. It's the pillar of the film, their relationship.
Yeah, really.
Anna Paquin and Hugh Jackman killed it every single time they both share scenes together in this movie.
Yeah, they have really good chemistry. Like, as much as I see them as father and daughter, it works on the level of brother and sister. But then the weird creeps who ship it, I do see that it's like romantic to it a sense. But just because their chemistry is rich, it could have gone either way. But he's definitely her father, guys. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a father-daughter relationship, weirdos.
Don't ship Wolverine and Rogue, but I understand it. I understand the shippers out there. You guys do.
And the fact that Wolverine and Rogue both have like similar types of powers that are harmful to others and themselves just adds to that dynamic, which is something Shadow Cat and Jubilee don't have with Wolverine.
Yeah, true. He just kind of feels like he's obligated to take care of them because they somehow always fall in his lap, and that's how they grow that bond. Whereas him and Rogue could actually probably sit down and talk about things. And
exactly.
And then that goes to the stellar Storm and Cyclops rescue when Sabretooth comes in. So I wrote down here for when Storm, Cyclops, and Sabretooth arrive on the scene. I said to myself, what was Rogue going to do once she got free?
Bounce, get the F out of there.
Because, well, that's the thing. Yes, obviously, like that's a go-to. But there's a moment. I don't know if it's just an acting choice on Anna Paquin or if this was directed towards her. Clearly, it went nowhere. But there's a moment where she looks like she's really determined to get out of that car seat, but it's not to run away, it's to defend herself. And it lasts for maybe, I think, a good 3 seconds. It's, I think, the first or second time after she looks back and sees the fire is expanding. She's like, all right, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And also the Sabretooth big-ass White Walker bitch is walking towards me. What the fuck am I going to do? Like, I wonder, was she going to break free and try to defend herself? And then my other thought was, were we robbed of a Storm, Cyclops, and Rogue versus Sabretooth fight? So, I don't know. What do you think about that? Or do you think that she just was just like, nah, I'm going to run?
Yeah, I think she was probably just going to run at that particular time just because she's so new to the world.
Mm-hmm.
She's had no training or really any self-defense. Like her whole shtick so far has been just running and hiding,
Right.
Like just hopping into the back of Wolverine's truck and hiding under his tarps.
Like, imagine that scene if she had that like edge to her. Like instead of hiding, she would have just gone up to him and be like, "Hey, I need a ride. I'm getting in your car." And he would just been like, "What?" Just like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, sugar. I'm getting in your car. I need a ride."
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted a sassy Rogue or like a takes no bullshit Rogue, like they could have had her wait for Sabretooth to come up to her in the truck and
and then
cut the seatbelt off, and then she could grab him and knock him out.
Yeah, that would have been great. And see, well, like you said, you pointed out how like she's really young in this world, but if she's a teenager, I mean, think about how irrational teenagers act. Like, and if you're a teenager with powers, I don't know, I feel like if they had built up on the fact that, if she were that irrational as a teenager, that would have meshed well with her being feisty, but also being that stupid teenager who thinks she can get away with things because she hasn't had that training or that knowledge in that world. But
can I say that the fight scene between Wolverine and Sabretooth in that scene was atrocious?
Yeah, it's just a lot of flying.
It's really bad, and you could tell they're all on wires.
Yeah, when Sabretooth jumps away, it looks terrible.
Yeah, I literally wrote that on my notes. I said Sabretooth's terrible jump running away gag.
Yeah, that was bad. That looked like that would have been used in like one of those SNL digital shorts to talk about.
There's also a really funny scene, like when Sabretooth hits him with a log. He hits Wolverine with a log, and Wolverine flies up off screen.
Yeah.
And then you don't see him for a minute, and then all of a sudden he just falls out onto the truck.
That is actually, it's funny. That is actually one of my favorite, like, high punch gags. Because they do something very similar in Buffy, where Buffy gets knocked out and she goes flying, and then she's out of frame, and then she drops in the frame. It's when she fights Dracula, and I don't know why, but that is hilarious to me. The idea that a person got knocked so high up that they're just flying in the air for a minute and they perfectly land. It is the most hilarious thing to me ever. And like,
that was so funny.
But it's just like, is that how physics work? I continuously have written throughout my notes that Cyclops in this is a bitch, and because he's a whole bitch. And I think back to this meme that I saw. No, it wasn't a meme. It was this tweet. This guy tweeted something a few weeks ago, and he was like, was screenshotting the movie, and he was just like, I love Cyclops' intro scene where he comes in and saves Rogue from her seatbelt.
I just snorted.
Yep.
Oh God.
If that wasn't a moment to let you know how his character gets treated later on in these films, I don't know what was.
Yeah, I wrote that on my notes that like I was halfway through the movie when I realized this, but like Storm and Cyclops say at least like not even at least, at most 3 or 4 lines each by halfway through the movie.
Storm has more impact in the whole movie.
That's because Storm looks good.
And she also looks the most powerful, like in terms of like the most special effects.
Like I thought Storm looked bad. I don't know if it was like the change in fashion, like by today's standards or what, but I used to think she looked bad in this movie. But rewatching it, her look is actually really ahead of the time.
The bangs could have been better, I will say. I wasn't a fan of the bangs in this first Storm.
Yeah, they could have been a little longer.
So then that takes us to when Logan wakes up in the mansion. But my first note for this scene was, who were the other X suits for? You know, he comes in and he looks and sees all the gym clothes and he sees the X-Men uniforms at first. There are like 6 uniforms. Who do they belong to?
Well, I was thinking when I was writing down my notes that I was like, there are all these X suits, and that they do give you that backstory with like Xavier and Magneto meeting each other at 17. They built Cerebro and everything. And I was like, wow, you know, they built the groundwork for a really, really, really nice prequel trilogy, like a proper prequel trilogy that like stayed in line with the canon that was established in the original film that they didn't do First Class. I feel like they could have done a lot more with a prequel trilogy.
Anytime the X-Men movies have the opportunity to do something that makes sense, they don't do it. Let's just say that right now. But yeah, no, you were right. Do I think they would have been wearing black leather back when Charles and Eric were teenagers? Probably not. But there were definitely other teachers there at that school who were X-Men. Who do you think they were? I feel like Forge would have been there for some reason.
Beast.
Beast had the little jacket. Remember, he has the jacket and the pants that he has in Last Stand?
And The Last Stand, yeah, I know. But like in the original, one of the original drafts of X-Men had Beast being one of the members.
Yeah. Beast would have looked disgusting in those uniforms. He just would have looked packed in.
Anyways, when Wolverine wakes up, I was thinking that they're having Jean being a doctor in this whole film. Like she's Dr. Jean Grey, but they never like acknowledge that she's a doctor, or she never uses her medical skills or scientific skills at all for any of the other films because she's been replaced by Beast. And I was like, why don't they just have Jean and Beast like work together and be brainy scientists together?
Sounds like equality, Jack. This is early 2000s. That's asking for too much. But yeah, so back to Logan in the mansion. I thought it was the only thing that I think I don't like that this movie does, and I know we've talked about this film and how they've said all the films and how they're set up. I don't think I necessarily like how the movie sets up Rogue as the entry point, but then the rest of the movie, once Wolverine comes in, the movies are all about him. Because I thought it would have been cool if like Wolverine got that introduction, we could have seen the reverse for Rogue as she's meeting other students. And I know they have like little cut scenes or deleted scenes between her, Shadowcat, and Jubilee, but even then, it's not anything.
Well, I wrote that down on my notes too. Even though it's nice seeing Rogue like interact with these characters in the school, it would have been even better if they delved deeper into the students' lives at the school.
But you know, the thing is though, the movies don't capture that too well. They don't. They bring up like what mutants are, and they bring up, you know, how they're oppressed and everything, but they never really always show how dark it is to be a mutant. You know, they don't go deep into that, I feel like. And the most that they do is probably X2 with Stryker and how much he hates mutants, but you never really see that that spite and hate that people have for them. That would have been a good way to show with the younger students, you know, like, because Charles mentions that they're all runaways and they're all dealing with this and that. Well, that would have been great to see, like, Rogue really be like, oh, I thought I had it bad. This is how you got here. You know, I think that would have been really good to show.
Yeah.
They should have had a repressed Bobby Drake coming of age gay story.
I mean, look at his choices, the choices that he has in his movies. He can't touch Rogue and Shadowcat, you know. What's the joke? Shadowcat's a lesbian, so
Yeah. I did like how Xavier was like talking, how they portrayed Xavier's powers, how he was like talking and whispers and echoes in Wolverine's head, because it's not like a traditional like superhero movie where you hear like the voices clearly. It's more like a horror film, because you're like, these voices sound a little creepy. What's going on? Am I losing my mind?
Yeah.
It's keeping in tone with the this isn't a traditional superhero movie. It's more veering on the lines of a sci-fi horror thriller than an actual comic book film.
That also shows, like, you know, how often has Xavier been whispering in the minds of his students.
Yeah. And that these powers can be terrifying.
Yeah. Especially, like, I mean, come on, like, I think Logan had every reason to be freaked out where he woke up. If you woke up and just heard a whole bunch of laughing kids running somewhere, I would have thought I would have entered in some type of ghost house. Like, this is the first time that I officially write in my notes, Cyclops is a bitch. Because Wolverine is talking about he grabs him up by the collar and talks about something, you want to get out of my way. You were in my home, first of all, sir. You choked up my woman. Like, I know Professor raised me well, but I got to blast your ass across the room. Like, I don't know. Cyclops is he's a bitch throughout the whole movie, throughout the entire trilogy, but this is where his bitch started, I think.
Yeah. He's like a non-factor in this whole film, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Like, he never has a backup pair of glasses. He never has, like, an extra pair.
No, he doesn't. You think that would be useful? Just one in the pocket, just in case something pops off when he goes to the grocery.
Shit, if I was in his condition, I would have like 2 extra ones, like in the backup.
Yeah,
he tries to fuck with me.
Like that hat that he wears later on when they go looking for Rogue, he should have had a pair right underneath that hat.
They could design a suit that could just like automatically replace it. You know what I'm saying? Like a visor.
Yeah, like if they gave him his comic accurate visor cap.
They really could have beefed up Cyclops way more. Come on now, like.
They could have. Well, it's because Bryan Singer was like very much in love with Hugh Jackman, as we see throughout these movies.
Or James Marsden.
Yeah. I feel like James Marsden is just like, I mean, I was Cyclops at one point in my career. I'm good. Oh, this kind of goes back to Rogue. This is just a small nitpick because I get for plot reasons. It just made sense. But in the montage, why is she already enrolled? She literally just escaped getting killed like yesterday, and they had her enrolled that fast? Or was that supposed to be like some clear time passage? Like had Wolverine been knocked out for like a week and Rogue was in the school? Like what? That was like
that's a good question, because there is a deleted scene with Storm and Rogue talking to each other after class, and Storm asking her how life at the school is like. I had like a collector's edition of the first X-Men movie, which integrated the deleted scenes into it.
Was it X-Men 1.5 or whatever?
Yeah.
Something that has been missing from all of these movies is that Rogue and Professor X have never had a scene together. And that bothers me that they never showed her talking to him about her powers or whether or not she belongs there.
Yeah.
I think that should have been a really good connection that they could have shown, and they never gave it any attention. The only time we see them talk is what? When she gets on the X-Jet in Days of Future Past in the Rogue cut. The cut.
Yeah. He just looks at her and looks away.
Looks at her. She's like, hey girl, I knew where you were the whole time. No biggie. That goes into Mystique's smooth ass intro when she's deceived Senator Kelly, and she makes him think that he's his assistant Gyrick. Mystique always has great intros.
Yeah, Mystique's intro in this movie is iconic. Like her body language, her facial expressions, the way Rebecca Romaine moves so fluidly, like your eyes drawn to her.
Yeah.
Her eyes.
Her eyes, her body, everything. So like for her to be a character who doesn't say hardly a thing in these movies, she leaves a very lasting impression.
Yeah.
Mainly due in part with the fact that she's naked, and I think that's a really smart approach to have for a shapeshifter, because if you're gonna shapeshift, you can't be wearing clothes all the time. I actually wrote my notes. I was like, "Bitch is naked and living her best life," because that's what she's doing. And this is a side thing too. When you kind of see her as Gyrick in the profile of Senator Kelly, before she's even turned into Mystique, there's like a blue shimmer on her face, or on his face, and the actor's face, who is Mystique. But there's a blue shimmer on her face, and there's a gleam from the sun that like makes his eyes look a little like gold. How hers is. I don't know if you picked that up, but I thought that was cool. Yeah, and then I said here that I wish they explained more about Magneto's magical machine of mutiny. Because they never really say how he built this machine and how it turns people into mutants. Like who created that for him? Did he just put scraps of metal together and was like, "Huzzah!
I
Mazel
think he
tov!"
developed it.
Yeah, I think he's
'Cause
developed this
he's
himself.
definitely a genius.
Here's another thing that bothered me a lot watching
What?
this. So when we go to Magneto's lair, first of all, he has a lair. And second of all, if you pay attention to that lair, it's really high tech, even though it doesn't look like it's high tech. Like if you look at the walls of the caverns and like the way he's walking to the prison and the bridge is making itself with the use of his powers, and the floor is just metal everywhere. Like he carved out the inside of this mountain by himself with all this high tech stuff. Why did we never return to this lair? Like it could have been a great like introduction to Genosha. That could have been like the origin spot of Genosha. It's really high tech already. Like why did we not return to this lair? Because obviously the government didn't go take it, or the X-Men never found out about this lair. Like we don't know where this lair is. He could have easily went back to this lair after he broke out of jail in X2.
They should have played off more on the Brotherhood versus the X-Men and how they handle different conflicts.
You could have done a whole trilogy just with Magneto's Brotherhood alone.
Yeah, I feel like that whole lair would have been a great fight scene place too. Like instead of them going to Liberty Island, they could have showed up at that lair and like had a whole like each of them fought one of the members of the Brotherhood in the lair.
I do want to point out Magneto's balls. I wish they showed this type of stuff more often, or they kept the balls throughout all the movies, but I love his magnetic balls when he's talking to Sabretooth at his desk and they're just like moving with themselves. It'd be cool for him to have like those little balls like at all times in like other layers or whatever, just to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
And it also foreshadows what he does to the plastic prison in X2.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like those balls kind of come back in X2. They're supposed to represent those little platforms that he makes. So then I think that cuts back to the X Mansion where Logan is still getting acquainted with everyone. And I have here when Logan asks Jean like the extent of her telekinesis, he's just like, you know, what kind of things? And she says all kinds of things after she slams the door. And I said to myself, she should have either levitated an entire drawer or levitated the whole fucking mansion. Because a door bitch.
Jean is so weak in this movie.
Yeah. She doesn't really sell it for me in this. Not like Famke Janssen. She's a great Jean. Like I enjoy her performance, but Jean as herself obviously is made weak in this. But that's always been the issue with Jean, is that she's always portrayed weak in any type of adaptation, whether it's live action or animated. And though part of that I think is mainly due to the fact that, well, I mean, that's what the producers and the writers said for the X-Men animated series, and I think that was true to form too for the comics, was that they wanted to have Jean portrayed as weak. So when they, I guess, eventually got to her storyline as the Phoenix, it would have been very out of left field that one of the quote-unquote weaker members of the team was actually this all-powerful, creature connected to, cosmic being. But, it's also true when it comes to portraying female characters in these superhero movies. At least, superhero movies and superhero content, at least back then, it's just almost a thing where sometimes they really hold back in letting the women be as powerful and as strong as they can be. And I think that we can all agree that like some of the best X-Men characters, some of the most strongest X-Men characters are the X-women. And it's just, they definitely get the short end of the stick most of the time when it comes to these films and some of their adaptations. But in the comics, Homegirl is a damn near a goddess. But, I said here again that Cyclops is a bitch. Because he literally walks in on on Dean and Logan, and clearly in a conspicuous situation, and he does not pop off more than he should. And again, maybe that's to show that Cyclops is a calmer character than Wolverine is. That could be it. Or like Cyclops could actually be afraid of Wolverine. I mean, that would make sense in this version. I feel like comic Cyclops doesn't give a fuck. Like, he's down to always fuck up shit with Wolverine. Like, they'll go at it if need be. But in the movies, I feel like he's really played off like, I don't know about this guy. I'm just going to stay over here with me in my eyes and be over here.
Yeah, he definitely is a cuckold.
Are you calling him a cunt?
A cuck.
Spell it, because it's only saying
C-U-C-K.
Yeah, what is that?
When you let a guy fuck your girlfriend.
Oh, there's a term
or your wife.
Oh wow, I did not know there was a term for that. Okay.
In front of you, yeah.
Honestly, probably that could have been his like leeway into wanting to have a threesome and just did not ask about it. Well, aren't they like fucking now in the comics? Aren't like Jean, Scott, and Logan like all living together or something? I swear they're in some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that somewhere that Scott and Jean are like sexual with each other, and Scott and Wolverine are sexual with each other.
I love that for them. They just needed to do that to release that.
It makes sense.
And there are nights where they want to do it with each other, but they use Jean as the excuse. And she's just like, guys, come on, I can literally read your minds. Just go ahead and fuck each other. It's cool. I'm good. I can hold out for tonight. Like, you guys do your thing. And they're just like, no, Jean, come on. She's just like, honestly, go before I make you. So then we move on to the very jarring Wolverine versus Rogue scene. Yeah, but he stabbed that little girl. Not on purpose, obviously. But what I liked about this scene and the fact that she uses her power is that it was instinct of hers to use her power. She picked up on the fact that Wolverine could heal. In that moment, she knew that she could use his power to his advantage. I feel like they don't do that enough with her, where she doesn't know when it's convenient to use her powers in any of the films when she really could. Because when you think about that, that was kind of smart. She could have easily just been like, oh shit, he stabbed me. But then she was like, no, oh shit, he stabbed me, but he can heal himself. Let me do that real quick.
I love the whole nightmare dream sequence horror vibe they were going with Rogue trying to wake him up and him just having a whole freak out and stabbing her in accident.
Yeah.
Like, I really felt like Rogue, when I first watched that as a kid, I really felt that Rogue was going to die.
Yeah. Which would have sucked, right? But at this point, they might as well have done that. When Bobby / Mystique tries to convince Rogue to leave.
Right?
Yeah. I feel like her and Iceman / Mystique, that could have been a really interesting scene where they kind of play off each other and there's like a back and forth. Because that also would call to Mystique and Rogue's relationships in the comics, which we know is a great one.
I wrote down that she was so cruel to her daughter.
Yeah, she is. Mystique's a terrible mother. And Magneto and Mystique, actually, their whole like energy in this movie is fuck them kids. So that leads us to the train station where Cyclops and Storm are looking for Rogue. By the way, I still don't know how Wolverine left before they did for him to steal Cyclops' bike, but he did because plot, it needed to happen. I'll put here, Storm knows not to go out like no bitch, and they always make sure of that. Anytime Storm has a moment to show out in these movies, she does. And I will give them that. Like, and by show out, I mean if this is about to be her dying breath, you're going out with her.
I'm just wondering why Toad is so strong.
Because he's Ray Park. That's why.
Like, if you see him when he jumps onto the bench and goes after Sabretooth after he gets thrown through the wall, It's just like he completely obliterates that subway bench.
For no reason. Well, remember later on he jumps on like the security guard's shoulders and crushes.
Yeah, and just crushes him.
But again, Ray Park, he had to come in and do his thing. Darth Maul had to come fuck it up.
Check out the Clone Wars. Ray Park does all he's not doing the voice acting. He's what do you call it when you control like the animated body?
Oh, he's motion capture.
Yeah, he's motion capturing the character of Darth Maul.
Oh, that is cool. I said if this movie was made today, Magneto would have raised all those squad cars and they would have all exploded.
Yeah.
Because
I thought they were all gonna die just because like I forgot like how like sweet things were back then.
yeah.
But I loved how it was done though. Like the train ripping apart and the way he took the guns and shot the bullets, and it was all real slow and the build-up was real slow and there was tension rising the whole time.
Yeah.
Like that just feels a lot better than just mindless explosions just going off all the time. There would have been a whole action sequence with Jean fighting all of them, and then the other X-Men would come in later on after they regrouped.
Yeah. But you know what? We say that, and that doesn't sound bad. I think just because we know what happens later on, and that would have been great to see before those movies ended.
When Magneto's holding the guns and he shoots those guys, well, that one guy, and holds the bullet, they point out that Magneto doesn't have to use his hands to control his powers. Like, he just winces a little with his eye. And I thought that was a really great way to show how powerful he is as a character. But they never go back and do that for the rest of the films. He always has to use his hands on everything. And another inconsistency I picked up on rewatching this, Xavier, he says that Magneto's helmet is designed to block his telepathy, like it is something new to him. Like, he never experienced this before. But we know from the prequel movies, if you want to consider them that he's had this helmet for a minute.
The First Class movies, I count those as separate timeline movies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wrote on my notes that I'm willing to forgive this inconsistency because maybe his old helmet was similar to that, but it just got obliterated somehow, and this is a completely new helmet, and Charles is just surprised he was able to remake it.
Well, the other, if you want to talk about inconsistencies with this movie in First Class, one huge thing is when Professor X says that he met Eric when he was 17.
Yeah, and that they built Cerebro together.
Yeah, and they built, well, okay, I found a loophole over they built Cerebro together. So if you think about the events between X-Men Apocalypse and when they had to rebuild the mansion, that meant technically that he did help him rebuild Cerebro. So obviously maybe the same events didn't happen that happened in Apocalypse, but maybe something did cause the mansion to explode before in the past that made Magneto help him rebuild it. There's a plot loop around
but
that.
Still, they weren't 17 when they first met.
Oh, they definitely weren't. They were not at all. People keep thinking that Xavier is British. He was born and raised in New York. I don't know where it came from that he was just, yeah, hello, I'm Charles Xavier. I've never understood that. So then things go back to the mansion, and that's when, Logan is upset because he finds out they were after Rogue the entire time. And he walks off, or he runs off. And then I said here that Storm and Logan's relationship is consistent. They always have moments where they go off and talk about their feelings. They have the relationships, and when they have the talks, it's always very plot-driven talks. So, I mean, that's good, because obviously when moments are tense and everything, you're going to confide in someone, or you have those character beats where it's just like, all right, how is this person really feeling about the plot? My next scene, the Scott and Professor Xavier scene, like after Xavier has zoinked out from trying to use Cerebro after Mystique said, fuck them kids. I think that's a really nice scene, but it's not earned at all, because this is the first time we see Scott and Professor X talking to each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, what?
That's a really good point.
It's the first time you see them. And then he's talking about, like, I'll take care of them. But then literally as soon as he leaves out, Jean's already fucked up. Like, like he should have, if he really wanted to get to Homegirl, he would have shot his optic blast through that X door to make sure that she didn't go through with it. What does he do? He runs. He literally has a long range power and he starts running. He's a bitch in this movie, yes. So Liberty Island. So
I thought having it set in New York was actually a really fresh idea back in the day.
hey, I think it was movies like Mission Impossible and Terminator that probably had seen and done the most as far as like visual effects and all that. That if they had done a lot of what we would love to see, I think we probably would have just gotten a 20-minute short film.
True. I mean, we have to remember this is back in the like 2000s.
Right. Something very controversial that is among heavy debate within the X-Men community, whether you're into the movies or you're into the comics or the TV shows, the suits. What are your thoughts and opinions on these leather black suits? Because this is when we finally see them all suited up as a team.
I don't hate them.
I thought they were sexy. They could have made them more like sportier. Yeah. Like if they would have done more like a yellow leather, but like still with like some like heavier like black leather elements to it. Like it would have been hot, but changed up the color for the different suits.
Well, what's cool about these suits is that I think they try very, very, very minimally try to like nod to the colors that all of them adhere to in like their actual like comic book suits, because you can see the color lining along the black, but it's not that prominent. I feel like the most that color lining is along that black leather is in the action figures. I don't know if you guys ever owned any action figures, but I owned like them, and they had like those very prominent lines that didn't seem as prominent in the movie. Like you can barely tell that Jean has a green trimming on her outfit.
Yeah, and Storm has a white trimming.
Yeah. The black and leather works because, like, again, it was late 90s, early 2000s. Everything was really futuristic looking. So looking cool in black and leather was like the in thing. But they could have still done a little bit more to make a good callback to the costumes. But overall, I don't hate them. I think they do work. The Wolverine and Mystique fight scene. I think for the most part, this fight still holds up. What do you guys think?
The Wolverine and Mystique fight's iconic. Yeah. It's one of the best fights out of like any superhero film.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
It's up there.
Yeah, and
too bad they play it adjacent to Toad kicking everyone's ass in 5 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I was noticing that, like, Wolverine has this great epic one-on-one fight with, like, the best villain they introduced in this film. And then the whole team is getting fucked up by Toad.
Not even Toad and Sabretooth, just Toad.
Jean's dumbass held him in place.
I know, like, she could have just blasted him somewhere real quick. Like, hard as fuck. Into, like, some boxes or some shit. Or into something that breaks. You feel me?
Oh, I thought it was really funny that Mystique was a statue.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
She was just waiting there after they walked by. She's like, "Gotcha, bitch." I'm a statue. Holding my little torch.
I wonder how long she was there. How long do you think she was there?
A good 10 minutes.
I love how she died too. She was like slightly smiling, like, I'm gonna survive it.
I'm gonna live, so I'm gonna just lay down and wait for my rescue.
I mean, what's horrible is that they didn't try to move her body. That's like horrible on their end. It's just like, well, we're just gonna leave her here until we finish up the mission. Even then, they don't go back to her because she has time to shapeshift into a security guard. Like,
and also the X-Men started murdering the Brotherhood.
I mean, I'd start murdering too if I had gotten owned by Toad.
That was wild. Like, Storm literally, like, bar the terrible line. Yeah. She really killed him. Like, she electrocuted him from the inside out.
I guess there isn't. There's no really moral standing when it comes to Storm and her wanting to kill. She does it really quickly without.
Like, you would think it'd be something the X-Men would be against. Like, Xavier would be like, you killed that man, Storm. But nah.
Yeah.
I just wish Toad and Sabretooth were in the trilogy more.
I mean, you get to see them again. You know, like that Days of Future Past cameo, and then
We don't talk about those.
Sabretooth's heavy involvement in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
What is that?
No, you're right. Cyclops is an idiot because the fact that Magneto had to tell him that Storm couldn't electrify them in a fucking copper conductor or whatever the fuck they were in, it was crazy. Like, Storm even looked at him like, what did you just say?
Are you trying to kill him?
Like, what kind of a leader are you right now? Oh, man.
And Jean's so weak that she can't unbuckle the shackles or anything.
Oh, my God. You are so right. Why couldn't she have done that? And you know what's sad? I think this scene is the only time that the original cast work as a team. There's never any other time where it shows them like taking on a bad guy together. Because Last Stand doesn't count because they all have solo battles.
Well, Last Stand doesn't count because Cyclops is dead and they're trying to kill Jean.
Right, yeah, they're not even together at that point, yeah.
And in X2, they're all split up.
Yeah.
And in Days of Future Past, it's mainly Wolverine. And Cyclops and Jean are dead.
Yeah.
It's literally just Storm in the future and Wolverine in the past.
I thought it was funny how when Wolverine almost stabs Jean through the Liberty thing, that's foreshadowing. Oh, and I said Sabretooth is definitely racist. I don't understand his hostility more towards Storm than Wolverine.
I thought he was attracted to her.
I'm saying how this scene with Rogue, this is the official beginning of X-Men hair origins.
True. I actually wrote that down in my notes that I liked that Rogue had an origin for her hair because she was just starting out onto that path as Rogue. So I was like, why doesn't she? It would have been awesome if they built up on that with each film. Like, she got another like part of that iconic Rogue look throughout each movie, and her powers grew more.
Yeah.
Like, maybe in X2 she would get like the iconic jacket she always wears, like the pilot jacket from the 90s cartoon.
Yeah, that would have been dope.
Yeah. Update her uniform to something a little bit more sexy now that she turned into a lady.
Yeah. That was funny that when like the mutant making light or whatever it's supposed to be, like everyone's running and screaming, and there's this one guy who's just standing there looking like, oh my God, what's that? No one else is standing to watch. He's the only one standing there just like, oh, shit.
He was ready. He accepted his fate.
For it.
But I thought the way that Senator Kelly died was lame. But I did like Magneto's plan. Even though he didn't know that like people would die if he turned them all into mutants. But his plan is really smart. His plan is basically to turn all the world leaders, not just the leader of the United States, but the world's leaders into mutants. And he, like, just because he's such a genius, he understands that if he turns the world leaders into mutants, into what exactly it is they hate, that they would want to self-preserve themselves because they turn into what they're like fighting against, so they're going to want to start to fight for them.
You know, I never thought about that. You make a good point. I didn't think about like he did that to preserve other mutants. I did not think about that at all.
Yeah, so like Magneto's not the bad guy.
Well, the only questionable is like he was gonna kill Rogue to do it.
Yeah, he was going to kill Rogue to do it, but you got to understand that Magneto comes from a background where it's the freaking Holocaust. Like, he knows his parents were incinerated or gassed. He's seen people die in front of him a million times over. So what's one more life to sacrifice in order to save an entire world of mutants?
Yeah, Magneto's always down to sacrifice whoever he has to make things better for mutants in general. That's one very consistent thing about him. He is consistently saying, fuck them kids.
Like, I do think that Magneto's plan was legit. when the machine blows up and it's just Wolverine and Rogue on top of the tower, and you think she's dead, and then the music swells up, and then he touches her forehead, and then he plays his face on her, and the music is singing and everything. It's such a beautiful shot. It just feels like everything that was built up between the two just came to this perfect point where he may have lost this basically daughter he was able to like have in the story. And then like when her powers start to finally kick in, and then his wounds come back from all the fights he had throughout the movie. I thought it was like a really beautiful scene. And the way the film ends too, it's like it ends in a way where it can still be a perfect standalone story, but there's just enough subtlety left in how Wolverine leaves the locket to Rogue, and he's off trying to find out what his past is like the setting up X2, but you know, it's not like in your face setting up a sequel. Like Charles and Eric have such great dialogue in that final scene, and the music is just perfect, and he's in this plastic prison and he's all contained, and he wasn't really the bad guy because he didn't know and he didn't want to believe that his machine would kill all those people.
Right.
And he's basically back to where he was at the beginning of the movie in the containment camp.
See, and that was a note I had earlier, and I was wondering, does he really not know that they don't kill people, that they don't kill everyone? I mean, I know that he sees Senator Kelly, and he sees how mushy and stuff he is, and he doesn't see him die. But I was wondering, does he know that they don't, does he know that the machine kills? Or is he
No, I don't think he did. And when Storm tells him that, like, Senator Kelly dies, he questions her. He's like, are you sure you saw what you saw?
Right.
Which leads me to believe that he was just in denial, or he thought maybe the X-Men were just trying to sabotage his plan.
Yeah, because they never really have follow-up with that line. Because if you're looking from a different standpoint, he could have said that line to allude to the fact that maybe like Senator Kelly is alive to some extent, and whatever he had left to do wasn't over. But then also, yeah, he could be just a man in denial. Him being blinded by the fact that he has this plan set for his people, and he's like, nah, I'm not going to let anything fall through with it. It's the chance I'm
gonna. Yeah, and it could have been a good setup for the Morlocks.
Yeah.
Because he could have turned to water and went to the sewer drains in New York.
Yeah.
Morlocks.
Yeah, that would have been great. Yeah, so I guess that brings us to the end after, like you said, Charles and Eric's conversation that actually gets reverberated throughout the X-Men films. You know, you hear, you know, I pity, pretty much Professor Xavier saying, I pity the fool who comes and seeks trouble at my school. Those are horrible, Mr. T. But pretty much that. It's a great piece of dialogue, and, you know, it really does set up, you know, what the X-Men are capable of. And, you know, in more ways than one, you know, I pity someone physically, mentally, all of that, who tries to look for trouble with my students. So yeah, that brings us to the end. So I guess the question I'll ask is, what's our favorite character from the movie?
Mystique. It was Scene Stealer in this movie.
Yes.
Literally no lines, but so much. And just her, like, her facial expressions, like, perfect choice choosing a model.
Yeah.
Mystique.
Even when people like Ian McKellen are talking on the scene, you're still glued to Mystique.
It's like she hangs on his shoulder, and, like, how she just, like, looks. She's, like, chilling. Like,
I love how there's something haunting and horrifying about her too, because in that scene where like Magneto is talking to Senator Kelly for the first time, her in that lighting when she is on his shoulder, she looks pretty fucking scary. Like, as dope as she is, if I were to see her in that lighting, I'd be like, oh no, what the fuck is this bitch doing?
I'm gonna go with Rogue. What's my favorite character out of this movie? Just because I thought her introductory arc was so well done, and I thought they could have done more with her.
Like, psychology surrounding her powers, and, like, people touching her, and, like, her experiences with that in school. Or
yeah, her own troubles in school, the fact that she wants to be close to the other students, but she can't.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, one of the things what makes her a really good introduction character, I wanted to say earlier, is that her power is so connected to something that so many people do and so many people want to do.
Yeah, her power makes her an outcast out of outcasts.
Right. Yeah. 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 I think I'm gonna have to say my favorite character in this would have to be Mystique, and then Rogue is close second.
Magneto also deserves kudos for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Magneto was great in this.
I thought Wolverine's story was really well done too.
Yeah.
But he gets the most development out of everyone in these films. So the whole film series is Wolverine and the X-Men. Like, let's be honest.
True. That I think Storm and Cyclops were definitely taking the short end of the stick.
The movies do definitely progressively better. Each movie Storm does more and more, even though it's...
And she has screen time. Like, you know when she's on the screen. Where Cyclops can kind of like,
blend into the background.
Yeah, for sure. He definitely can.
I'll give a shout out to Toad because Ray Park's Toad is probably the best version of Toad we're ever going to have.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, that's a Toad I would not want to fuck with.
One and only time that Toad will get a shout out. So, Devon and Jack, what do you guys rate the first X-Men movie?
I would give it a 7.5.
I would give it a 7 out of 10 too. But I think as a setup and as an introduction, it's really solid. And I do think that the film still holds up to this day, bar some of the action scenes. But regards to all that, this movie is a classic. It's a groundbreaking film. We would not have the MCU if it wasn't for this film. Like, I would put the original X-Men on the same level as like the original Star Wars or the original Jurassic Park by how it like changed the film industry.
I completely agree with you, Jack. I think this movie definitely holds up still. Watching it, it's not painful to watch, and there's no laughable moments where it feels like, oh, they definitely tried something new in this era of film. No, it does go really well. But I think it's the reason that people still like it because of how much the potential is there. And it was clear the intent was there to do something with it. There just wasn't follow through. But we'll talk about that when we get to the other movies. So in closing, I too give X-Men a 7.5 out of 10. So that concludes our very first episode of Case of the X. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing us geek out and love, but also complain about the very first X-Men movie. And hope you come back and check us out for the very next episode where we discuss X2, X-Men United.